So how does the Monster Hunter team go about choosing which monsters are actually featured in a new Monster Hunter entry? That is actually the subject of a recent IGN interview under their IGN First program, which during the month of January is going to be mostly featuring Monster Hunter Wilds and sharing as much information with us as possible. So I haven't really had a chance to take a deep dive into this particular interview, so I'm going to be doing it here for you guys, and I'm going to be giving you guys my opinions on it. Now you're going to be seeing some highlighted portions of this interview. This is just because I highlighted the specific quotes that the developers have said. There's going to be a link to the interview itself if you want to read it at your own leisure, because I'm not going to read the exact whole thing. I'm mostly going to be focusing on the ancestors that the developers provided to us and my thoughts on those answers. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said in here, what the IGN interviewers are saying is we get to hear in detail about the process that new and returning monsters went through before appearing in Monster Hunter Wilds, with a special focus on the processes of creation and selection. So I believe that this is Tokuda-san speaking here, and he says, we first consider what we want players to experience when facing major monsters like Arkveld. Arkveld, for those of you that haven't been following as closely, that is the flagship monster for Monster Hunter Wilds. So naturally, this is going to be a monster that is going to be featured prominently throughout the game, and it is going to be one of the most important monsters. He is also being referred to, I believe, as the White Wraith, and he is the monster that essentially destroyed Nata's village, the village of the keepers, which, you know, there's a whole thing about what exactly were they keeping? Why is Arkveld depicted in chains? You know, all of these are things that supposedly will be answered as we play through the game. And then he continues, as well as the setting, ecosystem, so on and so forth, unique to each title. Now, something that the developers told me when I specifically asked them, please don't show as many monsters as you have in the past. Do not reveal the whole roster to us. You know, most of us are already kind of sold on the game. It's just show bare minimum so that we can experience a lot of discovery in the game itself. And it was an interesting thing because I believe it was Ryozu-san who mentioned this, and he said, like, you need to understand that when we choose monsters to be featured, we are choosing them so that they can represent the ecosystem that we're also showing at any given time, which was interesting. Then he goes on to say, when we think about the kind of monsters needed to do that, in a way we start by putting puzzle pieces together. Like, if this monster exists in this place, how does the ecological pyramid work here? And this is kind of how you get to the concept of apex monsters and things like that. But yeah, everything, even though for a lot of us, you know, we're just thinking about, oh, what monster would be cool? In the creation process for the developers, it is actually very important that it makes sense for that monster to be in that location at that given time. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys can think of times where, like, that monster was in this location, made no sense whatsoever. Post some of those in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button. It really helps out. And if you enjoy Monster Hunter content, you can also subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. Then Tokuda-san says, we don't focus too much on the proportion or number of new versus old monsters. What's important at the end of the day is the overall level design and order of monsters across the entire game, as well as the balance of ecological pyramids in each area. We take this multifaceted approach to decide which monsters to include. It's like, okay, tell me how that worked for Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Of course, Generations Ultimate is more of a celebratory title, more like an anniversary title, so it's kind of like, everybody's here, let's bring as many as possible. But yeah, I think that there are definitely a portion of the Monster Hunter community that is concerned about, like, oh, where does this fit in the ecology and all that stuff. You have creators like Jacob, which we've had on the Third Fleet podcast in the past as well, who I know for a fact is, like, definitely focused on that, and probably Ratatosker and Oceanas, and there's more creators. I'm going to miss some for sure, so my apologies. But, like, there are definitely creators that focus a lot on that. There's definitely niches of the community that focus on that as well. But I believe that a large portion of the community is more like, just give us lots of cool monsters. We don't care. But yeah. Then he goes on to say, so even when we're selecting old monsters to put in the game, part of that involves making sure to stay true to that monster's concept while thinking about how much room each monster has to grow when they're reborn using current day technology and game design. And this is going to be a curse for those of us that really enjoy Legras, because obviously if they ever bring him back, they will want to bring back underwater combat. So whichever game is going to feature the return of Legras will likely feature water combat. Now watch me be wrong and Legras be one of the returning monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds, because obviously we also have Ivory Legras that focuses more on land combat and so on and so forth. But I kind of feel like they will probably want Legras to be a monster that shows up whenever they choose to do underwater combat again, but we'll see how that pans out. And here they're talking about setting the stage. And he's going to be talking about herds and how that is going to be one of the major concepts in Wilds. And so we created Doshiguma as a monster that lets players experience this element of the game. We were designing Doshiguma from a pretty early stage, in part to help verify the way that packs move. And Doshiguma is a very fun one to fight. I'm sure that a lot of you guys played it during the open beta, so you'll know, and it is definitely interesting. My bigger curiosity is going to be obviously Yankutku herds. That will be very interesting. But yeah, I do like the way that packs move. It's pretty cool. But not even just the packs of large monsters, but the packs of small monsters, how they all herd around the one, like for instance, those, I forget what their name, Karathnoths, or whatever it is. The ones that have the spiky boy that absorbs lightning. It's really cool and immersive the way that the whole herd joins around one of those with the big spikes. Then Fujioka goes on to talk about Raid Dao. And he says, I think part of a monster's character can be an appearance that simply makes you think that it looks cool, even among all the other unique monsters. We call these our handsome monsters. We believe that if we're able to have one of these cool monsters appear at just the right time, they'll stand out that much more as a unique character. We thought that Raid Dao was in a good position for that even during the design stage, and so we wanted it to be a cool monster. As Raid Dao's design was finalized before Arkveld's, even some of our own staff thought that it was the game's main monster, Flagship, until partway through development. That's just how handsome it is. Yeah, Raid Dao is pretty awesome, even if after you hunted him like a couple of times, he just feels like a little bit of a pushover. Which, you know, is understanding. Even kind of like Nergigante becomes a pushover quite fast, depending on how easily you adapt to his fight. And it's also important to mention, like, you know, I know that throughout my videos I talk a lot about the game's difficulty and all of that, but it is a fact that a lot of us have gotten better as hunters, so it is also kind of harder for Capcom and the Monster Hunter team to find adequate challenges for us without just resorting to zoom monsters that give us almost no time to react, especially with the improved reaction times on our hunters and attack speeds and, you know, animation fluidity and all of that. Raid Dao's biggest attack is one where it stores lightning in its body and slides its face along the ground to unleash all of it at once, he says. As it grinds its wings into the sand, the lightning combines with it to create fulgurite ore. The amount of electricity it stores rises higher and higher when it wears these crystals, and it can store electricity faster as well. He's talking about the little things that show up almost like gills coming out of his neck. You guys remember that in the thing? But yeah, the first time that I actually got beat up by Raid Dao was actually the wing attacks, the one where it just like slams down on top of you. That's the one that got me. Fujioka says that monster attacks are even a part of the game's stage design. When we were designing this stage, we talked about incorporating the process of lightning generating fulgurite ore, which is something that I really liked, by the way. And from my interpretation, it was like, oh, there's sand, shoots lightning into it, it makes glass. But turns out it's actually making fulgurite ore. He says the terrain is formed by fulgurite ore created when lightning strikes the ground and villagers use the ore to ward off monsters. We hope that players pay attention to how monster biology and attack methods are connected to how the game's humans live, which is pretty cool. Then he goes on to say, the feeling of playing together and being able to communicate on the same wavelength with shared information is extremely important to us. Our top priority during development is how we express the experience of people playing in the same space. So obviously this is them reinforcing that, you know, they want players to play together and all of that. And I know that this doesn't necessarily, you know, connect directly to the whole Fulgurador thing. But this is also because during this portion of the interview, they're talking about how, this thing, there's actually a lot of things to the way that Fulgurador is generated, needs to be generated for all the players. And here's a little interesting tidbit of trivia. If you only have ever played Monster Hunter World, I don't even know if Generations Ultimate is like that or not, but like Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, and all of that stuff, if you've played those in multiplayer, then you've seen that all of the monsters are synced across all of the players' experiences. So like if you were to be playing right next to a friend and you'd look at his screen and you'd see like a small herbivore monster there, it would also be showing up on your screen. And this is something that a lot of the new players take for granted. Back in the day, during the days of like Freedom Unite, that was not the case. So like sometimes, for instance, I could be getting rammed by a Bullfango and my friend is just watching me fall down, and the Bullfango's not actually there because small monsters were actually not synced across the different sessions of multiplayer, because it was just really hard to even get the large monsters synced, let alone all of the small monsters, because of the nature of interactivity with Monster Hunter and the overall experience. So that's something that nowadays we kind of take for granted. But back in the day, yeah, things were very different. It was kind of awkward sometimes. You'd be seeing some hunters attack air, and they would just be clearing out some of the smaller monsters, because smaller monsters also used to be a much bigger threat, to the point they would actually get you the cart and stuff if you weren't paying attention. But yeah. Then we have some more stuff here. Is this Fujioka or Tokuda-san? It's Tokuda-san. Monster Hunter does depict a fantasy world, but we want players to feel a kind of reality from each individual thing they see in game. Graphics become higher definition as hardware advances, and so we want the world setting to be as authentic as possible, because this kind of reality is connected to the game's immersion. And this, I know I'm gonna put some words into the developers' mouths, but this is kind of like, to me, where things like the hunting simulation come in, like the fact that you need to eat food in order to maintain your stamina. You need to sharpen your weapon in order to maintain your weapon while you're doing the hunt, and all of that stuff. And some of the other elements like tracking, which is not going to be, it doesn't seem like it's going to be as important in Monster Hunter Wilds as it has been in previous games. These are things that I think greatly contribute to the immersion, and this is why I argue so fervently in favor of these things, like cold potions, hot drinks, this type of stuff. I think that these are very important aspects of immersion. It's not just about the graphics, it's about everything else. Very much the same way in which the monsters move in believable ways. Well, most of them. Volstrax is a jet-fueled elder dragon. But he still attacks in somewhat believable ways. But you guys get the idea, right? The whole thing and how they kind of like cross over different creatures in the real world to kind of like become this monster that they've created in the game. I personally really like that detail. Then they go on to talk a little bit about Congalala. Congalala is a monster with a straightforward action compared to the unique monsters of the Scarlet Forest that hunters will have faced so far. Like Lalabarina, he says, it's easy to hit, and I think it ended up being perfectly placed for players to enjoy hunting as they make full use of what they've learned and the weapons that they've created so far. So I think that the idea is that Congalala is not really meant to be a big challenge, which I don't really think Congalala has ever been a massive challenge. Probably like some event quest and some older Monster Hunter games, probably beat somebody's face out. But the idea is for him to act almost like as an intermediate monster to introduce you to some of the other monsters you're going to be fighting, going to be a little tougher. When we have monsters appear, we're always conscious of not trying to make them easy to understand for players new to Monster Hunter. Of not just trying to make them easy to understand for players new to Monster Hunter, but also shock and delight fans of the series. You see, this is one of the points where I kind of feel like the marketing department goes in direct conflict with the actual creators, because like the Congalala fart is something that would have been really cool for people to experience first time in game, for people that maybe aren't familiar with Congalala, and it just being prominently featured in the gameplay footage that came out of Osaka and the cutscenes and all that stuff. I was like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool for some players to actually find that first time in game? It's like, wait, what? He farts on you? What? That's crazy. especially with the crazy cinematic that they have for that. So yeah. Fujioka says, recalling the reaction fans had when they announced Congalala's return. I think tossing Congalala out right there was just right for it. We announced it at Tokyo Game Show because we thought fans who know about Congalala would enjoy that. Once we did, the reaction ended up being even bigger than we imagined. We talked later about how that must have been the greatest moment of Congalala's life. True, because people don't really pay that much attention to Congalala in older games. It's just like kind of a, he's kind of like an early monster, but he does have the endearing thing of belching and farting, and that's always fun. But interestingly enough, this time around, after farts, he also has like a weak spot in his ass. So that's also cool. And here the title of this section is The Sensei Return. So obviously we're going to be talking about Yankutku. Yankutku is a monster that many Monster Hunter lovers know, and we're aware that they call it Sensei. Now the reason he's called Sensei, for those of you that don't know, is because Yankutku was one of the really bigger challenges that you would face early on and like some of the first Monster Hunters, even the original Monster Hunter. So he would actually beat people up a little bit, and they would call him Sensei because he would be the one where it's that point where you would have to get good. You would have to kind of like learn some things rather than just kind of get by hacking and slashing. You would have to learn patterns, stuff like that. Says Fujioka, clarifying the monster's positioning. We designed it as a monster that teaches you the basics when facing large monsters. Yankutku herds did exist in the game's setting, but we never had a chance to make that part of actual gameplay until now. This is obviously because of hardware restrictions and all of that stuff. It seems like a good fit for the systems of wilds that let us include packs of monsters, and we were able to find a moment for it to appear in the perfect way during the game's progression. What could he mean by a perfect way? And this person asked for more clarification. And Tokura-san says, while Yankutku is loved by many players right now, I think it was incredibly strong when it first appeared. Yes, it was. And by the way, I'm not even the one saying that because I only started playing by try. By then, a lot of people would have experienced the Sensei moment with Yankutku, so it wasn't even me, but this is what a lot of people tell me, including Gaijin Hunter, by the way. It's placed at the moment in the game where the difficulty curve suddenly spikes upwards, and we weren't sure that it'd be right to have it appear like that again to play the role of a teacher. That's why we thought we needed to do a deeper analysis of its strengths and what makes it feel strong. We looked at recent player trends and thought about the position they'd want Yankutku to occupy instead of simply being a teacher, which is why we've prepared a different kind of position for it. And then in here, Tokura-san is going to go a little bit in depth about his lizard garden, which is also really cool. He says, I made a garden that's like a miniature ancient forest for my lizards and even breed them there, he says. It's like there's vegetation inside my home. I've made an ecosystem there, complete with water, light, and wind. An artist who knew that I raised lizards told me to bring my largest lizard's shed skin, which he then scanned and proceeded and processed in order to make it a part of Yankutku's scales in the game. That's pretty friggin' cool. So when you're actually fighting Yankutku, notice that the skin that you'll see in Yankutku is actually going to be from a real lizard that Tokura-san has in his home. Then they ask, which monster's comeback is most awaited out of those that haven't made an appearance yet in Wilds? For me, give me the sand whales, bro. The Ranmaran, Genmaran, give me one of those. Please, please, I beg. I miss that monster so much, but I think I know what the answer is. That would have to be Legras. Tokuda instantly responds. Ever since here's the interesting thing though. If it's like, even though it is Legras, I feel that if Gormagala hadn't been in Sunbreak, I think that a lot of people would probably say Gormagala instead. I think that even Tokura-san might even go for Gormagala. Ever since World, people ask us to bring Legras back no matter where in the world we go. It feels like we've been constantly asked since then. Fujioka nods vigorously as he sits beside Tokuda. There really are a lot of fans both inside and outside of Japan who love Monster Hunter Tri, he says. Monster Hunter Tri is interesting. It is my very first game. And I didn't like it when it came out, but you guys probably already know the story for that. It's a very memorable title for me as well. Listening to the fans, I get the sense that monsters like Legras and Brachydios enjoy a particularly deep-rooted popularity. Gormagala as well. There it is, the Gormagala reference. There it is. As it seems many people have a lasting love of monsters that are featured on the cover art of the title. Excuse me. Yes, of course. Flagship Monsters hold a dear place in everybody's heart. As a matter of fact, Velkhana now holds that position for a lot of people, and I'm sure Nergigante holds that. I mean, didn't Nergigante win, like, I have a terrible memory, but I'm pretty sure that Nergigante won, like, 3 top spots across US, Asia, and Europe for the top listings of most popular monsters that they've done recently. Tokuda-san says, I'm one of the creators of Legras myself, so naturally I have a deep attachment to it. I might even say that I want to put it in the game more than anyone. There are a lot of difficulties, such as the fact that we haven't had aquatic battles. Bro. It's like a... Yep. Or action since Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, of course. But we've heard everyone's voices loud and clear, and I want fans to know that I wanted to make an appearance just as much as anyone. But they'll probably want it to have water combat. When looking at Monster Hunter as a series, I've always felt kind of strong passion that's created through communication, says Fujioka. The biggest characters that appear in Monster Hunter are its monsters at the end of the day. It's about how fans see these monsters, and that understanding is what creates the next step for Monster Hunter. That's why I think that carefully fostering the feeling of monsters as characters is key to Monster Hunter. And then the interviewer asks about Rathalos and how it's going to appear this time around. Wrath is the poster monster for the series, of course. So we're still... But here's another interesting thing, though. The monster that shows up on top of the logo for Monster Hunter 1, in case you guys aren't aware of this yet, that's actually not Rathalos, that's Rathian. But yeah, so we're still keeping that secret for now. I feel like Wrath is the kind of monster that makes both the creators and players think, yep, this is Monster Hunter when it appears. That's why we always give a lot of thought about how it'll show up impactfully whenever we develop a new title. Absolutely. During World, there were a lot of people around the globe who still didn't know about Monster Hunter, and so we depicted Wrath as the apex predator of the Ancient Forest's ecosphere, the game's first stage. But now that there are so many people who know about it through World, we've thought about how to place it in a position that they'd find interesting. And you know, that's kind of like the interview right there. I'm super excited about Monster Hunter Wilds. I can't wait to jump in. I'm sure that we'll have more IGN videos and coverage and stuff like that I'm going to be covering. So make sure to check out the original article if you want to get a little bit more details about everything that they talk about over there. But are you excited about Wilds? It's not long now. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that jazz. And we'll see you in the next one. Stay strong. Stay safe. Peace out.